I grew up with Elon as like a mega hero. It'd be profoundly un-American to use political power to the degree that Elon has it to hurt your competitors and advantage your own businesses. And I don't think people would tolerate that. I don't think Elon would do it.
He is truly one of the great entrepreneurs of our lifetime. I mean, no ifs, no ands, no buts.
Elon being on the phone call for Trump is being the richest guy on earth is far more important than anything else that you could be to him. That's what he values. It's no big deal.
Elon Musk was top of mind at the New York Times DealBook Summit, even though he wasn't even there. But of course, it makes sense that everybody was talking about him, given his very, very, very close relationship with the next president. And that is where we're going to start in Money, Power, Politics tonight. With me now, David Gura, correspondent for Bloomberg and host of the Big Take podcast, and Ron Insana, CNBC senior analyst and the CEO of iFi.ai. All right, David, we saw Elon Musk's influence over Donald Trump grow during the election, and now he's inside the administration. What was your take on what all these CEOs had to say? I mean, glowing reviews. Do you think they were sincere, or do you think they want to make sure they're on the right side of Trump, and that means be on the right side of Musk?
Well, I think it's a mix, and I think that they're curious, like we are, about how far this relationship goes and what it brings Elon Musk and all of his various companies. And so you listen to Ken Griffin there of Citadel at the top, praising him as an entrepreneur, and then you juxtapose that with Sam Altman of OpenAI. I think, you know, those two have, shall we say, a history, one that's tied up in courts now. And I think what's interesting about that is, like, Elon Musk, of course, is someone identifiable with SpaceX and Tesla. He also has a burgeoning AI company of his own. And what Sam was getting at in his comments is, you know, he's in a position now with Trump's ear and the influence that he has to potentially guide the government to favor companies that he has in AI, in other sectors. And, you know, I saw what I thought was a pretty genuine response there from Sam Altman, believing that he wouldn't exploit the power that he has, the connections that he has. I'm talking about Elon Musk here. I noted that came up with Jeff Bezos as well, because, of course, Jeff Bezos has an interest in space, too. He also very publicly at the conference today kind of doubled down on that as well, thinking that, you know, there's no way that Elon Musk would exploit, again, these connections that he has to kind of benefit his own companies. I think that the jury's out on that, given just how close they do seem to be.
Ron, are we sure we're getting it right in terms of how close Musk and Trump are? Let's talk about the job Trump gave him, right? He's the head of the Department of Government Efficiency. Do you know what that department does? Nothing. They have no employees. They have no mandate. They have no power. And not only is Elon Musk in charge of it, he's only the co-head, right? It's efficient, except there's co-heads. And now you've got the richest, one of the most powerful men in the whole world, Elon Musk, and he's now co-heads with Vivek Ramaswamy. One might say, I don't know, he's close to Trump in theory, or did Trump just punt him off to Siberia to talk a lot, but maybe not have the power to do anything, and not do anything unless Vivek says it's okay?
Well, there's that, and Stephanie, he doesn't have the power to do anything, period. I mean, the Department of Governmental Efficiency does not emanate from the U.S. government. It is outside the government. It would require an act of Congress to change the spending, to alter the budgets of the United States government. So it has the power to make recommendations. Whether or not it has the power to persuade Congress and ultimately the White House to do every line item in their proposed $2 trillion reduction in federal spending is an open question, as you say. And how tight is he with the president? Hard to say. There have been a lot of memes that go around that suggest, you know, Donald Trump may not for long enjoy the fact that Elon's getting so much attention, maybe sometimes more than the president himself.
David, you mentioned Jeff Bezos. I want to share a bit of when he was talking about the kind of things he's hoping to work on with Trump, which to me were kind of like, yeah, no duh. Watch.
He seems to have a lot of energy around reducing regulation. And my point of view, if I can help him do that, I'm going to help him. Because we do have too much regulation in this country. This country is so set up to grow. By the way, all of our problems, all of our economic problems, like if you look at the deficit and, I mean, you know, the debt, the national debt, and how gigantic it is as a portion of GDP, these are real problems, and they're real long-term problems. And the way you get out of them is by outgrowing them.
Yeah, and you know how we end up with Silicon Valley Bank blowing up and how we end up with the subprime crisis and payday lenders destroying economically vulnerable people? Lack of regulation. David, can we just, or excuse me, Ron, can you help us with, yeah, of course, he wants to be involved in deregulation. That's like my kids wanting to be in charge of setting the rules in my house. Deregulation means let's get rid of the rules and let me run wild.
Yeah, look, I don't think we want methane flaring.
Go ahead, Ron.
Sorry, Ron.
I'm sorry, David. Yeah, I don't think we want methane flaring, that contributes to additional, greenhouse gases and global warming. I don't think we want entire deregulation. As you aptly said, the global financial crisis, in my estimation, was largely the fault of rampant deregulation in the lending community and created a problem that was almost unfixable. So, I would come down on a different side of this, and I would actually take issue with the notion that the size of the federal debt has anything to do with deregulation. It has a lot more to do with, rampant federal spending, and in some instances, very justifiable federal spending during the COVID crisis and beyond. So it's interesting for someone in Jeff Bezos's position to simplify this problem down to just that and having, a one-to-one relationship with the national debt. That's just not the way this economy works by any stretch of the imagination. By the way, we do not have a lot of economic problems. We have a productivity boom going on. We're growing 3%. Inflation is down. It's interesting that people still characterize the economy this way when it's fine.
Peter, excuse me, I'm thinking about Peter Navarro. David, let's talk about Peter Navarro. We learned that he is coming back. He was in prison. He was in the last Trump administration, focused on trade policy. He's going to do that again. But the last time around, he was bouncing all over the White House. Steve Mnuchin wouldn't take him in Treasury. Gary Cohn wouldn't take him with the National Economic Advisor. And he eventually ended up with Wilbur Ross because Wilbur was the least affected and not really paying that close attention. Trump is really bringing this guy back. Why? Just because he's a super loyalist? He basically went to jail to stand with and by Trump?
Yes, he's newly out of jail, and the president-elect praised his tenacity in the statement announcing his appointment today. But you're right. I mean, you look back on that first term, and he was somebody who was always mixing it up. Every cabinet official feared that he would have, the last minute in the room with Donald Trump and be able to sway his mind and make him do something extraordinary and dangerous. Here we have him again, and I think what's really interesting about this is when President-elect Trump picked Scott Bessent to be his Treasury Secretary, there was this feeling all across Wall Street that, Donald Trump is taking a safe approach now. He's picking somebody who's not going to do anything radical. He's somebody who Wall Street largely knows. Well, introducing Peter Navarro again to that mix is just going to gum things up. I think best case, going to introduce somebody who's going to be pushing for these kind of hawkish policies, dangerous policies that are going to make kind of any cooler heads have to really struggle to be heard in that room, be that the cabinet room or any kind of room with the president and other policymakers.